I have described the techniques and concepts related to out-of-body experiences and inner alchemy very early in my books and writing in general. In the book, Out-of-Body Experiences Quickly and Easily, I describe techniques that inner alchemists use to leave the body and fly across many dimensions, including the physical dimension. Indeed, the ability to move across this human dimension while out of body is a major facet of that book. For that reason, that book in some ways can be thought of as a preliminary and at the same time a developed edition, a further nuanced reading, to the art of projection, which I then later introduce in step-by-step and fine detail in the course book, The Way of the Projectionist. I mention this here as a preliminary to this video, because I have been asked to explain and better detail the difference between visualization and actually projecting, in accordance with the techniques mentioned in the above books. In particular, one commenter on my website has asked me to explain the difference, from the inner alchemist's point of view, between a true out-of-physical body experience and a strong imaginative visualization. This person asks, what is the difference between them visualizing being at their grandma's house and them being there while in a real out-of-body state? And while I could describe many different kinds of tests that could be employed, like recording visual data or the like, to identify the difference between supposedly actually being there and visualizing being there, as some practitioners recommend, I feel it is far better to give a true account of how inner alchemists understand the nature of reality, and in doing so, answer other lingering questions that this person had about the difference, if any, between that which is outside the mind, the objective common world shared by us all, and that which is in the mind, in other words, the difference between the out there and the in here, between what is in the mind and what is out there in the supposed real world. And in doing so, answer how such an understanding by inner alchemists explains such things as visualization, the natural progression into deeper and deeper trance states, and the threshold point between affecting and creating, transmuting, something, even the astral body, from the imaginary to the objectively real, to whatever degree. All of this is important in answering this set of questions, because this commenter further makes the point that in accordance to my writing, and the techniques that I describe in detail in my books, I have said that from the inner alchemist's point of view, there is no difference between the out there and the in here, between what is in the mind and what is out there in the supposed real and physical world, as I have said. Well, these are very difficult points to describe, and really, they are impossible to explain in complete detail in a short video. But it is my hope to provide a basic understanding of the techniques favored by inner alchemists and how it is that such a grandiose statement like, the out there and the in here are the same thing, can be quite legitimate from the inner alchemist's point of view, and further how such techniques using such an understanding can take the dedicated practitioner from simple to complex visualizations, from light to deep trance states, and in that way from simple imagining to highly focused meditation, which will lead the practitioner to complex energetic action, alchemical action, that can affect the outer objective world in the most real way possible. To try and give some explanation of this in this short video, I must start by discussing the commenter's basic question, which is, what is the difference between a strong visualization and the supposed real thing? And to that, the simple answer is that from the inner alchemist's point of view, there is no difference between strong visualization and the real thing. But there is a caveat to this is the important part, and that is that this is only possible when the visualizer, the focuser, has attained enough focusing power and skill to make these visualizations strong and stable enough. Without this power of focus, such visualizations will always be just visualizations. And yes, it is possible for anyone who is willing to put in the effort, which boils down to steady and unrelenting focus, to develop this kind of power and ability. Inner alchemists aren't special in that sense, they are just individuals that are relentlessly focusing in one particular direction. Now, to explain this further, this realness of the real is a relative thing, to be sure. That is, there are different gradations of what is in a sense potentially real, and to explain this we can contemplate the nature of personal reality. In its most basic sense, what is real for each and every one of us boils down to what we perceive with our senses, what we can see, feel, taste, smell, hear and this is an important and, the intensity of those perceptions, being that these intensities not only define how real a thing or experience is to us, they also define the kind of time that we may experience, either short or long in duration. Why intensity is most important in the context of the questions asked is because it is the key principal difference between a visualization and an actual event. First off, we can start by defining the real from the unreal, from the average human viewpoint. Now, there is sometimes a major difference between certain cultures and others. A supposedly primitive hunter-gatherer culture, for example, might perceive a different world than would a modern Western person. That hunter-gatherer culture might believe in nature spirits and animism, meaning that they may believe that all things, whether a tree, a rock, a tool, a weapon, have an inherent spirit, and as such, the world is governed in a way by subjective inner reality, as much or more than the objective physical laws that in general in other more supposedly modern cultures become the only possible ones, the only important ones, the only real ones. The modern world only believes in the reality of the physical. It has created a line in the sand that stipulates that only the commonly perceived, and only commonly and ruled to be common law, is reality, while the subjective is not, and it therefore whitewashes for the most part or completely ignores the subjective inner reality and its power to affect the world. Inner alchemists, on the other hand, know, through direct perception and experience, that the subjective does indeed affect the objective. It actually creates it, and all action, even crossing time and space to get to Grandma's house, either physically or in an out-of-body way, can only, begin through inner subjective action. Some extremely rational people may point out that quite simply what they define as real for them is what is real to the physical senses only, and to those instruments created by science to understand in expansive notions and fine detail, those things already uncovered by the physical senses. And making such a statement of distinction, such a line in the sand between the ruled to be real by honestly most of the modern world, they may further proclaim that being that physicality is all-important, being that it is the only real thing according to them, the subjective is in essence therefore inconsequential. The above point of view is understandable if those that accept this reality truly are only bound to physicality and feel no inclination, no pull, from the spiritual aspects of themselves at all. But from the inner alchemist's point of view at least, it is an erroneous conception of reality on many counts. But to keep this on point, from the perspective of this video and the questions asked at the beginning of it by the commenter, I can point out first off that the mind, as the modern world has grudgingly begun to realize, can affect the body. In other words, scientific inquiry has noted on many occasions that the visualized can and does matter to the physical body, and in a very real sense the mind does affect matter, and on rare occasions may even become matter. But why is it that some mind stuff becomes matter in that sense then, while some does not? Why is it that certain thoughts have more matter power as it were than others, being that a person may have 1,000 thoughts, perform varied visualizations, but such thoughts seldom if ever affect the modern rationalist version of the real world? What is the difference therefore between the visualization of Grandma's house and a real house? Where is the matter-non-matter line? Well, as I stated before, it is intensity, and it is particularly the intensity of focus, the intensity of the visualization and therefore the power of the focuser. The stronger the focus, the more intense the thought or visualization, so that the more intense that this visualization becomes, the more real that it is to the individual, and eventually, believe it or not, to the world at large as well. If I use an example that I have mentioned before of thinking about a lemon, about splitting one open, seeing the juice squirt out, of imagining the bitter delicious taste in your mouth, then in imagining such a thing, you may notice that your mouth may now be salivating. So, through this visualization you have induced an autonomic physiological action, which is supposedly not within the realm of conscious bodily control. You salivated by consciously thinking of a juicy sour lemon. We can see through this simple example that thoughts do matter, on certain occasion, and we can further contemplate how with much more power such a visualization might have more intensity, so that as focus increases either through time or emotional force, this increase in intensity may make these particular thoughts matter more and more, until a threshold is potentially reached and something truly magical can happen, even on occasion from the rationalist's reality point of view. But, is there a limit to such visualizations? The modern rationalist again might say that yes, there is a limit and that this limit is a constant, an unalterable law that says that thoughts might make you salivate but they can't make things from nothing without physical force, and they certainly can't move your mind, your astral body, your ghost, or whatever, across the country to your grandma's house. Interestingly, from the inner alchemist's point of view, what such individuals may be saying is that their thoughts to this point in their lives have not, that the thoughts of all those that they trust as authority figures seem to have not, but perhaps they fail to see some of the magic that is all around us, and can be a part of all of us, if we can but focus properly and allow the inner parts of us a little more freedom and expression. So, an inner alchemist takes such a notion that thoughts can't be real, can't do that, as a challenge, and they begin to focus in a relentless manner on techniques that in time begin to greatly empower the focus of their attention. They can see energy directly as it flows in the world, and being able to do this, they can see that to believe that only objects matter is to live in a very tiny cube world, at least for them, but that with practice the inner alchemist or any rationalist that is interested can move farther and farther away from that tiny rationalist cube. Inner alchemists know as energetic fact, through direct doing, that through the increase of attention, a person can through great focus turn thoughts into objects, introduce new objects, new things, into that rational cube as it were. Great focus can turn thought into things that matter, and this can be done by first changing the individual reality, the subjective state, the visualized, and then such a growing intensity can in time even change the reality of the world at large, the human world, and even those that would never ever leave the tiny rationality cube. Such intensity can even learn to move across the perceived outer world in the most unbelievable ways, like a ghost may travel, and defy any notion of simple physical law. A practitioner can do this because they know that their focus of attention makes supposedly non-matter, matter. They have discovered through inner action that if a thought, if a visualization, receives enough focus, enough intensity, it can, sometimes be called real. So, with all that in mind now, focusing on this, and giving it through that focus more intensity, like a finely tuned visualization that is being brought more and more into the potentially real reality that even a modern person might agree to as being real, this notion that I am trying to explain in this video, just like a visualization, is at first just that, a collection of thoughts, a relatively organized inner happening. But focus maintains that thought collection in the mind, and that maintaining makes that thought collection more real to the thinker. It makes it more crisp, more detailed around the edges. If the focus goes even further, if the individual focus is even more persistent than rationally normal, then that visualization of traveling to another place without the physical body can attain a realness that can make grandma's house seem so real, that the visualizer may even touch and feel things in that house, touch the furniture of the visualized house, let's say, and such feeling, due to the intensity of that focus, becomes very real, very matter-like, to that visualizer. With even more focus, more intensity is built up, and in time there will be no difference between the supposed real house and the visualization of that house by the visualizer. Intensity begets more intensity, and then something magical begins to happen, and the house in the mind and the real house in the rationalist idea of the out there unite. They become entangled in a way, a kind of quantum entanglement, and at such a point the line between the out there and the in here blurs, until it falls apart completely, and at that point you are there, actually there, at grandma's house, but you are also here, you are both here and there, you are one, all is one somehow. And when you see grandma move a chair in that house that is both here and there, she really is moving a chair, and you can see that faraway place and be at that place, you can be both here and there simultaneously. There is no difference between one and the other, all is one, all is connected like a twin particle quantum state that unites that out there with the in here. The secret to why some things work, and others don't is intensity, focus, that begins with a simple visualization and changes not only the personal reality and the transformations of the inner alchemist, but in time even the nature of the physical world. This is how an inner alchemist defies space and time, how they learn to move beyond their body, beyond the safe tiny cube of modern rationality, and project farther and farther away from the modern conception of the real. There is no difference between a visualization and the real, but only if an intensity threshold is reached. It is intensity that matters. Once the intensity of focus is enough, either through time or strong emotion and passion, the rationally impossible becomes reality, and in that sense again, the simulation becomes real because in the end there is no real difference between the out there and the in here. If you are interested in the techniques that inner alchemists use to increase intensity power, I do describe these in step-by-step detail in the book, The Magnum Opus. I will leave a link to it, along with the other books mentioned, in the video description below.